describing about the whole Varnashrama system to Uddhava. And last week we were reading a lot of verses where Krishna was describing about the Brahmacharya ashram. And today the verses we'll be covering, Krishna will talk about the Grihastha ashram, and he'll also speak a lot of verses describing in general the duties of the different varnas, duties of Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas. And then the next chapter, Krishna will further elaborate on the Vanaprastha ashram and then the Sannyasa ashram. Okay, so before we get into a discussion, we'll first recite the key slokas from 11th canto, which Goswami Prabhu has given us all. Krishna varnam tusha krishnam sango pangaskrapasadam yagne sankirtana praye yajjanti hi sumedasaha dheyam sada paribhavagnam abhistadoham tirtas padam shiva virinchinatam sharanyam vrityatiham pranatapala bhavabdipotam vande mahapurusate charanaravindam tattva sudustyaja surepshitaraja lakshmim dharmistya arya vachasadya ragad aranyam mayam rigam daitayip Sitam andadhava vande mahapurusate charanarvindam Kalim sabhajayanti arya gunagya sarvaginaha Yatra sankirtane neva sarva swarto bilabhyate Nahi yata paramola bodhehinam brahmyatamiha Yato bindeta paramam santim nasyati samsrutihi Devasi bhutaptaninam prachinam nakin karonayam rinicharajan Sarvatmanaya sharanam sharanyam gato mukundam parihritya kartam Sapadamulam bhajata priyasya Chaktanya bhavasya hari paresa Vikarma yachot patitam katanchit Dhunoti sarvam hridi sannivista Verenayam nipataya suchupali pondra Salva dayogati vilasa vilokanadye Jhayanta kritta dhiya sayana Sanado tatsamyama puranurrakta dhiyam punakim Vibhyastavam ritakatodavaha strilokya pada vaneja sarita samalani hantum anushravam shrutibir angrijam angasanges tirtha dvayam suchisadasta upaspisanti Tava vikriditam krishna nirnam paramamangalam karna piyusamasadya tyajanti anyaspriham janaha Tvayopabhukta shragganda vaso alankara charchitaha uchista bhojino dasas tavamayam jayemahi tasmad bhavanta manavajyamanantaparam sarvagya ishvaram akunta vikunta deshyam nirvinadhir ahamuhe brijinabhitapto narayanam narasakam sharanam prapajye yaprapya manusamloka mukti dwaram apavritam grihe sukhaga vatsaktas Tam arudha chutam viduhu. Okay. So we'll continue our discussion. So we'll be reading from Canto 11, Chapter 7, Text 40 onwards. So last week we read to Text 39. So today we'll start from Text 40 of Chapter 17 or 11 Canto, and we'll continue on. So now these next couple of verses, Krishna will talk about some of the duties for Brahmanas, how they can maintain themselves, and the duties of Kshatriyas, and he'll also talk about duties of Vaishyas. And then after that, Krishna will give a series of instructions for those who are in the Grihastha ashram, and that will end this chapter. And then next chapter, chapter 18, Krishna will start talking about the Vanaprastha ashram. Okay, so this is Canto 11, Chapter 17. Text number 40. We'll just recite a few prayers before starting. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Ajnanatimrandasya Jnananjanasalakaya Chaksurumitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaur Bhaktavinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Okay, text number 40. All twice-born men, Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, and Vaishyas must perform sacrifice, study the Vedic literature, and give charity. Only the Brahmanas, however, accept charity, teach the Vedic knowledge, and perform sacrifice on behalf of others. So in this verse, Krishna is giving a little bit of overview about the duties for the three top or upper level of varnas, duties for the Brahmanas, Kshatriyas and Vaishyas. And Krishna is giving a general description that all three of these, the Brahmanas, Kshatriyas and Vaishyas, who are all twice born. So in Vedic culture in general, only the top three, or only the Brahmanas, Kshatriyas and Vaishyas, they would go to Gurukul and they would get second initiation. So except for the Shudras, all the other three Varnas, they would go to Gurukul, they would go through the whole Brahmacharya ashram, they would study the Vedas, study the Shastras, and so on and so forth. The Shudras, they won't go to Gurukul and they won't get second initiation. So in this verse, Krishna is saying all twice born men, which means the Brahmanas, Kshatriyas and Vaishyas, all of them must perform sacrifice, study the Shastras, and number three, give in charity. So these three duties have to be performed by all three of them. So Kshatriyas have to study the Shastras also. It's not that studying the Shastras is only for Brahmanas, but even the Kshatriyas, they also have to study the Shastras, they have to give in charity, and they also have to perform sacrifice. That's why we see in the Bhagavatam the example of so many kings who were such learned personalities that they were called Raja Rishis. That means kings who acted just like rishis, because they had gone through the whole Gurukul system and they had studied all the Shastras. So Vaishyas also, they're also supposed to go through the Gurukul system and also take second initiation and study the Shastras. In some cases, Vaishyas, they don't go through the Gurukul system, but definitely for Kshatriyas and Brahmanas, they always go through the Gurukul and they get twice born, they get second initiation. And Vaishyas, for most cases, it happens like that. And so these are the common duties, but then Krishna says that only the Brahmanas can accept charity and only the Brahmanas can teach Vedic knowledge and perform sacrifice on behalf of others. So when it comes to giving charity, Vaishyas are supposed to give in charity, Kshatriyas are supposed to give in charity, and Brahmanas are also supposed to give in charity. But when it comes to accepting charity from others, only the Brahmanas are qualified to accept charity from others. The Vaishyas, they can't accept charity from others. And the Kshatriyas, they also aren't supposed to accept charity from others. So in Prabhupada's purports, he'll mention this point many times, that only Brahmanas and also sannyasis, only these two classes of men, they're qualified to accept charity from others. Why? Because all the Brahmanas and the sannyasis, they're in the renounced order of life, they don't work. And because Prabhupada explains in Krishna book that these Brahmanas and sannyasis, they've completely dedicated their whole life, their very existence, into the worship of the Supreme Lord, into the worship of Vishnu, or rather Krishna. So because they've dedicated their whole lives, their very existence, to the worship of Krishna or Vishnu, therefore they're qualified to accept charity from others. Whereas others like Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, they have a lot of mature duties and they can earn income by their own endeavor. But Brahmanas and sannyasis, they engage the whole time. They're 24 hours a day just busy in Krishna conscious activities and worshipping the Lord, and they don't have time to go out and collect. And also because their very existence is dedicated to serving the Supreme Lord, they're fit, or they're worthy of being given charity to. So this is an important point. Prabhupada will mention many times that only the Brahmanas are qualified to accept charity. Others, they can't, they're not supposed to accept charity. Kshatriyas, they're not supposed to accept charity. Vaishyas also. And secondly, Krishna is saying that only the Brahmanas, they should teach Vedic knowledge. So this is also very important. In Krishna book, Prabhupada writes that it's not only a Brahmana's duty to study the Shastras, become very learned, become very scholarly, but it's also the Brahmana's duty to teach what he's studying to others. And Prabhupada explains in Krishna book that it is a duty of a Brahmana to not only study the Shastras, but also to teach the Shastras to others, and to make more Brahmanas, and to make others into Brahmanas also. So in this way, Prabhupada explains that this is one of the characteristics of a Brahmana, or the responsibilities of a Brahmana. Not that he just simply studies himself, just learns how to do all the sacrifices, yajnas himself, and just keeps that with himself. No, Prabhupada says a Brahmana's duty is to study and also to share this knowledge with others. And Prabhupada explains that it is a Brahmana's duty to make more Brahmanas. So this is one of the responsibilities of Brahmanas. And this is something that all of us can keep in mind and try and apply in our lives, because although some of us might not be second initiated, still we're all, by Prabhupada's mercy, we're all, aspiring to be at least as Vaishnavas, who are said to be higher than that of Brahmanas, or who are said to have all the qualities that Brahmanas have. So if we actually want to call ourselves as Brahmanas or Vaishnavas, then we have to study the Shastras ourselves, and then we're also supposed to take the responsibility of making more Brahmanas. We're also supposed to take the responsibility of making more Vaishnavas. We're supposed to take this responsibility of preaching, doing outreach, and converting more, elevating more souls into the platform of a Brahmana or platform of a Vaishnava. Prabhupada many times he would explain that all the problems we see all around us in society at the moment, it's because there's no proper leaders in our society. Prabhupada says in ideal civilization, there's Brahmanas are supposed to be at the head, and the Brahmanas are supposed to give guidance to the Kshatriyas, and this way everything prospers. And the Brahmanas are said to be the brain or the head of the society. But Prabhupada explains in a current modern civilization, there's no proper Brahmanas, leading the civilization, leading the governments or the societies around the world. So Prabhupada explains that that's why he started this Krishna conscious movement, and one of the main aims of ISKCON or Krishna conscious movement is to make more and more Brahmanas in this world who will be qualified to lead others towards enlightenment, towards self-realization. And then there will be happiness in society. So Prabhupada explains that this is one of our responsibilities as members of the Krishna conscious movement. It's our responsibility to, first of all, ourselves to become like Brahmanas, exemplify the qualities. And secondly, we have to go out there and make more Brahmanas. Only if someone is going out of his way to teach others and also make others into Brahmanas, only then is he said to be, or is qualified to be called a Brahmana. Simply studying for oneself doesn't qualify as a Brahmana. Prabhupada explains in Krishna book. And as an example, I was thinking of someone giving in charity, because it's given here that Kshatriyas, their duty is to give in charity, perform sacrifice, and study the Shastras. In terms of giving in charity to Brahmanas, one of the ideal examples is that of Lord Ramachandra. And his example is cited in the 9th canto, Srimad Bhagavatam, by Sukadeva Goswami. Sukadeva Goswami, he explains in the 9th canto of Bhagavatam that after Lord Ramachandra, he returned from the forest back to Ayodhya and he was crowned as the king. He started performing a lot of great big sacrifices. And the general etiquette is, again, as after you do these sacrifices, you're supposed to give in charity to the Brahmanas. So remember, Krishna said the only persons qualified to get charity is the Brahmanas and the sannyasis. So a king would do these big sacrifices for the auspiciousness of his kingdom, and then at the end he would give in charity to the Brahmanas. But in this instance, in 9th canto, it's explained in Bhagavatam that Lord Ramachandra, he was so magnanimous, he was so merciful, and his love and devotion to the Brahmanas was so much that whatever he had in his treasury, whatever possessions he had in his kingdom, in his palace, everything he just gave in charity to the Brahmanas. So much so that the only thing that he had left in terms of his possessions was just the clothes he was wearing on his body. So that's the only thing he had left. Every single thing, every single cent he had in his possession, every single dollar he had in his account, in his treasury, all his possessions, all his chariots, soldiers, palace, whatever he had in his possession, he just donated everything in charity to the Brahmanas. So much so, Sukadeva Goswami explains that Lord Ramachandra, at the end, all he had left was just the clothes on his body. That was the only thing he possessed. And Sukadeva Goswami explains that, and next to Lord Ramachandra, Mother Sita, the goddess of fortune, the only thing she had left was, again, her clothes and just her nose ring. That's the only thing she had left. All of her garments, all of her different clothes, jewelry, all of her possessions, everything was also again given in charity to Brahmanas, and the only thing she had left in her possession was just her clothes and the nose ring she was wearing. So in this way, Sukadeva Goswami explains how magnanimous Lord Ramachandra was when he came to giving in charity to Brahmanas. Now, on the other side, we have these brahmanas that Lord Ramachandra has given in charity. So Lord Ramachandra, he's acting as the ideal Kshatriya, and then Sukadeva Goswami, he explains how these brahmanas, they act as the ideal brahmanas. When these brahmanas, they receive all the wealth of Lord Ramachandra in charity, they become so much overwhelmed by the merciful nature of the Lord. They get so overwhelmed by the magnanimous nature of the Supreme Lord that they started to cry tears of ecstasy, thinking of how compassionate is my Lord, that every single thing he had in his possession, he has given in charity to us. You know, how magnanimous is he, how merciful is he? He must love us so much. There is no one more kind and merciful than Lord Ramachandra. So thinking like this, these brahmanas were so much overcome by emotion, and they were crying tears of ecstasy. Then these brahmanas, they come, approach Lord Ramachandra, and they appeal to him, and they glorify Lord Ramachandra for his love and devotion to brahmanas. And these brahmanas explain that, my Lord, all this wealth, this great opulence that you've given to us, thank you for giving this to us, but my dear Lord, we don't need any of this. Why? Because you've already given us the greatest charity. What's the greatest charity? These brahmanas explain that by coming within our hearts through the Shastras, through Harikatha, Krishna Katha, you have already dissipated the dense darkness of ignorance within our hearts. So by giving us the Vedic knowledge, by giving us Vedic wisdom, by giving us the instructions of the Shastra, you have already entered within our hearts and dissipated the dense darkness of ignorance in our hearts. And by doing so, you have already given us the greatest charity, which is ever to be given. So we don't need all of these material possessions, wealth and opulence you've given us. So you please take it back again. So in this way, the brahmanas, they first accepted whatever charity Lord Ramachandra gave them out of respect. And when someone is giving you a gift, and if you say, no, I don't want it, it's a bit rude, and the other person might get a bit offended. So generally, whenever someone offers a gift, we very graciously thank them and accept it. So that's what the brahmanas did. They first gracefully accepted whatever wealth Lord Ramachandra gave. And then they very nicely, with sweet words, explained to Lord Ramachandra that you've already given us the greatest gift by dissipating the dense darkness of ignorance in our heart. And we don't need anything else. You please take whatever you've given us back. So in this way, the brahmanas, whatever they got in charity, they again gave back to Lord Ramachandra. So in this way, we see the ideal example of a Kshatriya giving everything in charity to brahmanas, and also the ideal example of a brahmana. That, yes, he accepts charity, but he only accepts as much as it's needed for maintaining his existence, and he only accepts as much charity he needs for his service to the Supreme Lord. It's said that whatever excess charity a brahmana gets, he again gives it out in charity to others. He distributes to others. And in this way, a brahmana, he always stays in a poverty-stricken condition. During the day, a lot of different peoples will give a brahmana charity, and at the end of the day, whatever excess he has, he will again just distribute in charity, and at the end of the day, again, he'll become a pauper, he will again become a poor person. So this is the ideal standard of brahmanas, and also we see the ideal standard of Kshatriyas. Now, in the second canto of Bhagavatam also, Prabhupada, he explains about different benefits or results one will get by offering charity to different personalities. And Prabhupada gives 4 different examples. Firstly, he says that one possibility is that we give in charity to a non-Brahmana. And what's the result of giving something in charity, giving money in charity to a non-Brahmana? Prabhupada explains, if you give money in charity to a non-Brahmana, then in your next life, you will get the same money back in equal proportion. So if you give $100 in charity to a non-Brahmana, in your next life, you'll get the same $100 back in equal proportion. Second option or second scenario Prabhupada explains is you give in charity to a half-educated Brahmana or a half-qualified Brahmana. And if you give in charity to a half-educated Brahmana, then in your next life, you get the same money back times by 2. So if you gave $100 in charity to a half Brahmana, in your next life, you will get 100 times 2, $200 back. Then Prabhupada explains, the third scenario is you give in charity to a fully qualified Brahmana. And if you give something in charity to a fully qualified Brahmana, then in your next life, you'll get the same money back times by 100 or 1,000 times. So if you give $100 to a fully qualified Brahmana in next life, you'll get 100 times 100, or you'll get 100 times 1,000. So $100,000, like that, you'll get in return. Then the fourth scenario, Prabhupada says, is if you give in charity to a Vaishnava, or Prabhupada says, uses the word Veda Paraga, or one who has studied the Vedas, or one who has realized the essence, the conclusion of all the Shastras and all the Vedas. So one who is a Vaishnava, who is dedicated his mind, body and words to serving the Supreme Lord. So if one gives in charity to such a person who has understood the essence of all the Shastras, then in his next life he will get the same money back times by infinity. So there's no counting the value he'll get back. So Prabhupada explains, if you give in charity to a Vaishnava, you'll get the same thing back times by infinity, or you'll get the same proportion times by unlimited numbers. So what does that mean, that you'll get the same thing back times by infinity? Which means we won't get any mature result, but we'll get the priceless gift of bhakti. We'll get the priceless gift of advancing in our devotion, priceless gift of going back home, back to Godhead. So in this way, Prabhupada explains the 4 different scenarios. You can either give in charity to a non-Brahmana, a half-Brahmana, a full Brahmana, or to a Vaishnava. If you give in charity to a Vaishnava, whatever money you gave will be times by infinite, and you'll get that much in charity in your next life. Something which has no material value, which is beyond any material value, which is priceless, which is Krishna prem, love for Krishna, bhakti. So in this way, Prabhupada explains the 4 different types of charity. And we'll go to the next verse, text 41. A Brahmana who considers that accepting charity from others will destroy his austerity, spiritual influence and fame should maintain himself by the other 2 Brahmanical occupations, namely teaching Vedic knowledge and performing sacrifice. If the Brahmana considered that those 2 occupations also compromise his spiritual position, then he should collect rejected grains in the agricultural fields and live without any dependence on others. So now Krishna is explaining that if a Brahmana feels that going out and begging alms from others, getting charity, if he feels like this is degrading his consciousness, or this is not good for his spiritual life, it's polluting his consciousness, then instead of going out and begging food for his maintenance, he can maintain himself by doing sacrifices for others and by teaching the Vedas to others. In this way he'll get some donations and he can maintain himself. But if the Brahmana still feels that working or doing the service of teaching Vedas and doing sacrifices and getting donations, if he still feels not satisfied by doing that as a profession, not satisfied as doing that as a mean of maintaining himself, then he can reject that, and instead, to maintain himself, he can just go out into the fields and just collect rejected grains. So he can just go out into the fields, pick up some whatever rejected rice is available, and just by collecting from the ground whatever foodstuffs rejected by others, he can maintain himself like that. And example of this, like practical example of this in real life, we see in Chaitanya Charitamrita, exemplified by Srila Raghunath Das Goswami. So Mahaprabhu, Prabhupada explains, he gave different instructions to different disciples of his, to different followers. For example, Prabhupada explains to Rupa Goswami, Sanatan Goswami and Srila Jiva Goswami, Mahaprabhu, he gave them instructions to preach. So therefore, these 3 Goswamis, they wrote so many Shastras and they very strongly preached and propounded Gaudiya Vaishnava principles, philosophy, so on and so forth. But Mahaprabhu explains to other disciples, Prabhupada explains to other disciples, Mahaprabhu, he gave different instructions. For example, to Srila Raghunath Das Goswami, Mahaprabhu, he gave him the instruction to very strictly follow all the rules and regulations of the renounced order of life. So then, being instructed by his spiritual master to do this, Raghunath Das Goswami, he exemplified, or he was the personification of renunciation. Krishnaraj Kaviraj Goswami, he explains. So much so that Krishnaraj Kaviraj Goswami explains that the Raghunath Das Goswami's regulatory principles were just like lines on a stone. So if someone draws something in stone, using like a steel pen or something, starts drawing or carving something in stone, then no one can rub that line off. It will just stay there for, hundreds and thousands of years. Just like in India, we have so many nice ancient stone temples, and in these ancient stone temples, so many beautiful, drawings or carvings have been done of Vishnu and his pastimes and so on and so forth. And these lines etched in stone, no one can rub them off. They just stay there for hundreds and thousands of years. So Raghunath Das Goswami's regulatory principles, his daily sadhana was just like that. It was just like a line in a stone, which means, if he had, fixed, okay, I'll wake up at this time, he would always wake up at this time. There would be nothing stopping him. No other external factor or distraction would stop him or cause to be an obstacle in him following his regular principles. And he was so fixed and so regulated and so strict in following all the different rules and regulations. Every day he used to chant a huge number of rounds, just like Haridas Thakur. And every day he also had a fixed number of times he would offer obeisances, both to the deity and also a fixed number of times he would repeatedly offer obeisances to Vaishnavas. And in terms of this principle of how a Brahmana, if he feels begging charity from others is not really good for his consciousness, then he should go out to the field and just collect rejected grains. Raghunath Das Goswami exemplified this. So initially, when he first arrived in Jagannath Puri, Mahaprabhu very graciously welcomed him, and then for a couple of days, through Govinda, Mahaprabhu's personal servant, Raghunath Das Goswami, he used to accept the remnants, the Maha remnants of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Then after some time, Raghunath Das Goswami, he thought that this is not good or proper for me to eat such nice foodstuffs. Instead, what I'll do, I will just go and stand in front of the Simhadwara, in front of one of the gates of the Jagannath Puri temple, and I will just beg alms. So then he started doing that. He would just stand in front of one of the gates of the Jagannath temple, and he would beg alms from whoever was walking by. Then one day what happened? He stopped doing that, and instead of begging alms in front of one of the gates of Jagannath Puri, he then starts going and lining up in front of a charity booth. Just like we have our Food for Life van, every day it goes to Newtown, and then there's a line of people waiting in front of the van, and they get a plate of prasad or a pre-packed box of prasad. So initially he was going and begging in front of one of the doors of the Jagannath temple. Then afterwards he felt that wasn't good, and then he went one level up and he started standing in front of the charity booth, which was giving out free prasad. Then when Mahaprabhu heard about this, he said that this is actually very good. Why? Because when one stands in front of the temple and begs prasad or alms from others, Mahaprabhu explains that this attitude of begging alms by standing in front of the temple, it's very similar to that of a prostitute. How so? If we remember in the same 11th canto, when we were reading the section of 24 Gurus, one of them was the prostitute named Pingala. So in that story it's given this prostitute, she was standing outside of a house and she was looking and waiting for some customer to come, give her money and enjoy with her. So as she would stand in front of her house, she would look at different men walking by her house, and she would analyze, will this person come and give me money, or maybe this one, or this one looks very rich, he's wearing nice clothes, he looks like a rich man, definitely he'll have a lot of money, definitely he'll come and give me a good price and enjoy with me. Or maybe this person, I've seen this guy before, he has come with me before, definitely I think today he'll come. So in this way, prostitute, we see with the example Pingala, she's always looking at different male and analyzing, okay, maybe he'll come, maybe he'll give me money, or maybe he'll give me more money. So in this way, Mahaprabhu explains that if one accepts this profession of begging in front of a temple, then his mind becomes like that, like a prostitute. One will start analyzing, maybe this person will give me something in charity, maybe this person will give me something in charity, this person looks very wealthy, definitely he'll have a lot of money, he'll definitely give me something in charity. So in this way, when one starts thinking like this, then his mind becomes polluted, and then one can't chant Hare Krishna peacefully. So in this way, Mahaprabhu explains that that's why standing in front of the temple and begging, this isn't the best. It's good that Raghunath Das Goswami, he stopped begging in front of the Jagannath temple. It's good that he's gone to the charity booth. When you go to charity booth, there's no question of analyzing whether he'll give me, You just stand in the line and get your plate of prasad and then you go. So you save your mind from so much trouble analysis, all this material analysis. You just go stand in line, get the prasad, and then you're free to chant Hare Krishna, you're free to think of Krishna. So like this, Mahaprabhu was explaining that what Raghunath Das Goswami has done is very good. Now, of course, Raghunath Das Goswami, he's a eternally liberated soul of the Lord. He's a Nitya Siddha devotee, so there's no question of, a tinge of this consciousness being in his mind. But as to set an example for others, to teach others, Mahaprabhu is talking like this. Then it doesn't stop there. Then Raghunath Das Goswami, he goes one step further. Then after some time, he even stops standing in line at the charity booth, and instead, to maintain himself, what he does, in Jagannath Puri, all the Mahaprasad, Lord Jagannath, will be in so much big quantity that will all be given to different storekeepers to sell. So there'll be a lot of different storekeepers who will get all this Mahaprasad, Lord Jagannath, and they would sell it. And some of the Mahaprasad, Lord Jagannath, that wouldn't get sold, it will stay on the side for 2-3 days, and then it will start decomposing. So when this Mahaprasad, which is unsold for 2-3 days, starts decomposing, then the shopkeepers, they would just throw it to the cows, give it to the cows to eat, because it's starting to decompose. It's not good for human consumption. And some of this rotting or decomposed Mahaprasad will be so bad that even the cows wouldn't eat it. Even the cows will reject this decomposed Mahaprasad. And that decomposed Mahaprasad, which was even rejected by the cows, Raghunath Das Goswami, later on, he used to go pick up that decomposed Mahaprasad, which even the cows rejected. He would take it home. At home, he would wash all of that decomposed Mahaprasad, and he would remove the outer part of the rice and the hard inner part of the rice, which was still okay to eat, which hadn't gone off, hadn't become contaminated. He would wash that, mix the inner portion of the decomposed rice with a little salt, and then he would take that as his prasad. And that was the, such high level austerity Raghunath Das Goswami was doing. And when Swarup Damodar Goswami came, he forcefully snatched some of this decomposed Mahaprasad, which he had washed and mixed with salt, and Swarup Damodar Goswami, he personally took some and said, what nice nectar you're eating, you're keeping for yourself. Then Mahaprabhu, he also comes when he finds out about this, and Mahaprabhu also, he forcibly takes this decomposed prasad, rejected remnants, which even the cows rejected, forcibly from Raghunath Das Goswami, and Mahaprabhu also eats this. And Mahaprabhu says, what tasty nectar you're eating every day, and you're not sharing with us. So Mahaprabhu was very pleased to see this such high level demonstration of renunciation by Raghunath Das Goswami. So that's what this verse is talking about. That if a Brahmana feels that going out and begging, getting things in charity, in donation is not good for his consciousness, then to maintain himself, he should just simply go to the agriculture fields and just collect whatever rejected grains are on the floor. So this was exemplified by Raghunath Das Goswami, and obviously we can't imitate all this. We're definitely nowhere near that level, but one thing we can learn from Raghunath Das Goswami, Mahaprabhu had told him to exemplify or strictly follow all the rules and regulations of the renounced order of life. So Raghunath Das Goswami, he carried that out with utmost sincerity. So that's something we can keep in mind and follow. And we go to the next text. This is text number 42. The body of a Brahmana is not intended to enjoy insignificant material sense gratification. Rather, by accepting difficult austerities in his life, a Brahmana will enjoy unlimited happiness after death. So it's given that Brahmanas, persons renounced order, they're supposed to do a lot of austerities. And as we've discussed many times, Prabhupada, he would many times say that our austerity in this age, day and age, in Kali Yuga, our austerity is to simply chant Hare Krishna and to push forward the Sankirtan movement. We chant Hare Krishna ourselves, and we inspire others, we make others to also chant Hare Krishna. So that's our austerity for this day and age in Kali Yuga. Text 43, a Brahmana householder should remain satisfied in mind by gleaning rejected grains from agricultural fields and marketplaces. Keeping himself free of personal desire, he should practice magnanimous religious principles with consciousness absorbed in me. In this way, a Brahmana may stay at home as a householder without very much attachment, and thus achieve liberation. So one of the qualities a Brahmana is supposed to cultivate or demonstrate is to remain satisfied. And that's what Krishna is talking about in this verse, that a Brahmana, he should remain satisfied in his mind by whatever little he is getting, by collecting from the agricultural fields or marketplaces the rejected grains. And this principle of being satisfied with whatever comes out of his own accord is gone into depth, is very deeply discussed in the 8th canto Bhagavatam, in the section of Lord Vamanadev and Bali Maharaj. If you remember, Lord Bali Maharaj, he was asking Lord Vamanadev, why are you only asking for 3 steps of land? I am the ruler of the 3 worlds. Ask me more. I can give you so much in charity. And Lord Vamanadev, he gave, in response, a very beautiful series of verses explaining the importance of being self-satisfied, by being satisfied just with whatever comes of his own accord and not over-endeavoring, not being greedy for more. Lord Vamanadev, he explains that if I weren't satisfied with just 3 steps of land, then I wouldn't be satisfied even if you gave me a whole island of Jambudvip. Even if you gave me a whole planetary system, I still won't be satisfied. Why? Because if I get one planetary system, then because of greed, I'll want another planetary system. And then I want more and more and more. In this way, the consciousness of one whose senses are uncontrolled, he will never find peace. So in this way, Lord Vamanadev, he stresses or makes us think and highlights to us that we need to control our senses and develop this quality of being satisfied with whatever comes of his own accord. And Lord Vamanadev, he explains that only those persons who are satisfied by whatever comes of his own accord or whatever comes by destiny, and they don't over-endeavor in the pursuits for acquiring different things, and they don't get overcome by greed, only those persons who are self-satisfied, only they can be happy in this material world. All others who, not being satisfied, start over-endeavoring, becoming greedy to acquire more and more things, they'll never be peaceful in mind, and they'll never be happy in life. So how can we apply this in life? How do we know what's over-endeavoring for material things? How do we know, when we're going beyond the limit? Like Rupa Goswami, he also talks about this in Nectar Instruction, that Achahara Prayasascha Prajalpaniya Magraha, that over-endeavoring for material things. So how do we know when we're over-endeavoring? My Guru Maharaj, he gives very simple principle. How we can understand this is whenever, if something is putting us down in our spiritual life, or impeding our spiritual life, then we can take it that we're over-endeavoring. For example, we might get a promotion in a job, and the new job requires us to work for many hours in a week, 60 hours a week, and we'll know that if we take up this new job, then we'll have to work 60 hours a week. We won't have time to chant rounds. We won't have time to do any sadhana. Then that's considered as over-endeavoring, because we're compromising on our spiritual life. But if we get a job offer, a promotion, which isn't really going to hamper our spiritual life, then we can go for it. What's the harm? We can get more money from Krishna, and we can use more money for in Krishna's service. So we can go for that new job, or we can go for that promotion, because this new opportunity, this new job is not really going to hamper our spiritual life. So in this way, we can judge everything by this single point of what's if something is not conducive for our spiritual life, not conducive for our spiritual advancement, then we shouldn't go for that. So if it's not hampering our spiritual life, if we can still practice basic sadhana, then we can go for it. And also my Guru Maharaj explains that different devotees have different money karma. My Guru Maharaj, he terms it like this, money karma, which means that some devotees, for them, due to their karma, money just naturally comes to them through investments, through inheritance. They just easily get jobs, they just easily get a nice job, they get a lot of money, and they have very good money karma, and money just comes from naturally. Other devotees, they have to really struggle hard, and even after struggling hard, they're not able to accumulate so much money. And my Guru Maharaj explains that as devotees, we shouldn't compare ourselves with other devotees, saying that, this devotee has so much money, I have less. This devotee has, a lot of opulence, wealth, possessions. He seems to be very well off materially. Why is it that I'm not getting such a good job? Why is it I'm not also earning so much money? So my Guru Maharaj explains, this isn't something that we should compare amongst devotees, because different devotees have different money karma. So therefore, some devotees, they're able to acquire money very easily. Others, they're, due to their karma, they just get a very basic pay or basic salary, and they live according to that. And whatever comes naturally to us without over endeavoring, without working so hard, we should just be satisfied with that. Whatever naturally comes to us, whatever money or job comes to us naturally, just be satisfied with that and accept it as Krishna's mercy. So we shouldn't compare what money or possessions and things like that amongst devotees. Instead, what we should look out for is the bhakti of different devotees. So this is the real wealth of us. So we should look at other devotees, other householders or families, and see what bhakti they have, not how many cars they have or how big their house is or what job they have or how much salary they're getting, but instead what we should zoom in on, focus on, is the bhakti that others have. And that's the real wealth of a particular individual. So we should see that, this family, they have so much bhakti in their house, every day at night they do Gaurati, they sit together and they read Bhagavatam, they have kirtans in their house, in this family they do a bhakti vriksha in their house twice a week, they do kirtans in their house, they do this preaching, that preaching. This family, they come to a temple and they do such nice service in deity worship, in the flower department, cleaning, cooking, so on and so forth. So this is what we should be looking at. And if there's something we should compare and look out for, zoom in on the bhakti that different devotees have. And taking inspiration in that, we should also try and up our bhakti in our spiritual lives. So that's the quality of satisfaction for Brahmanas that Krishna is talking about. Then we go to text 44. Just as a ship rescues those who have fallen into the ocean, similarly I very quickly rescue from all calamities those persons who uplift Brahmanas and devotees suffering in a poverty-stricken condition. So Krishna in this verse is he's explaining that those persons who go out of their way to give in charity and help out the Brahmanas and the Vaishnavas, Krishna, he feels very much obliged to them. And just like a ship, it goes and rescues those who are drowning in the waters, in the same way, Krishna will pick us up and rescue us from the ocean of mature existence. And very quickly take us back home, back to Godhead. By the simple act of just giving in charity to the Brahmanas. Text 45. Just as the chief bull elephant protects all other elephants in his herd and defends himself as well, similarly a fearless king, just like a father, must save all of the citizens from difficulty and also protect himself. So now, having discussed a bit about the Brahmanas, Krishna is now talking about the duties of a king. So a king is supposed to be like the big head or the bull elephant, which protects all the other elephants. And the king is also supposed to be just like a father also. So just like a father, he protects his children. A father, he shows love and compassion, and he assists his children, teaches his children, and helps them grow up and mature in age. So in this way, a king is supposed to do all those things for his subjects, for his citizens. And in the Bhagavatam, there's many ideal examples of kings given. And one of them is that of King Gaya, which is given in the 5th canto of Bhagavatam, after the story of Bharat Maharaj and King Rahugana and Jarat Bharat. The story of King Gaya comes in 5th canto Bhagavatam, I think it's chapter 15. In that Sukadev, that section, Sukadev Goswami, he explains that there are 5 qualities of an ideal leader, 5 qualities of an ideal king or a Kshatriya that Maharaj Gaya, he exemplified. What are those 5 qualities? Number 1 was Posana, which means he took care of the maintenance of everyone in his kingdom. Posana literally means that making sure everyone has enough food to eat. Then I've written this down, I'll read it out. And the next one is Prinana, which means giving gifts in charity. The number 3 is Upalalana, which means to satisfy the citizens with sweet words. Then number 4 is Anusasana, which means to give instructions to the citizens into how to become first-class citizens, how to become perfect human beings. And it also, Anusasa also includes correcting the citizens and chastising them when they're doing something wrong. And number 5 is Prajapalana, which means protecting and giving security to the citizens. So that's what Krishna is also talking about in this verse, text number 45. So these 5 qualities of an ideal king or a leader or a Kshatriya is something we can all practically apply in our lives, because many times in our devotional lives we'll be put into a position of leadership or a position where we'll be managing or handling other devotees. Just like we might be put in charge of the kitchen, for Janmashtami. Okay, Prabhu, you and your Bhakti Vriksha, you cook the feast, or you and your team of devotees, you help in doing the decoration for this festival, or you and your team, you come and do the whole arrangement for Govardhan Puja, so on and so forth. So many times in our bhakti lives, we'll be put into a position where we'll be leading other devotees, we'll be managing other devotees, so on and so forth. So when those circumstances come, these 5 qualities is something we can remember. If we want to be an ideal leader, then we have to tick all 5 of these boxes. For example, number 1 is Poshana. Poshana means it is our responsibility to make sure that the devotees around us, they're all fed nicely, they all have good food and prasadam. Just like in the kitchen, if any devotees come, then Prem Sagar Prabhu, first thing, he makes sure that whoever volunteers, they come into the kitchen to do volunteer service, he makes sure that every one of them, they get prasadam. And he keeps some prasadam out on the side for them, pre-packed, and he gives them. So then naturally all of his volunteers, they'll very happily work very hard and vigorously in the kitchen, understanding that they don't have to worry about their food at the end of the service. Prem Sagar Prabhu has already arranged all the prasad. There'll be nice prasad at the end, and they'll happily enjoy it. So then whatever volunteers they come to the kitchen, they'll nicely work hard. So in this way, this is the first duty of every leader or a king or a leader of any group, that he needs to make sure that there is proper food, prasad, for those devotees he's managing. So if some festival time, we're coming to a temple with a team of devotees, say we're doing the cleaning service or decorating service, then it's our duty or responsibility to arrange that there's some proper prasadam for all the volunteers. So we need to go and talk to Prem Sagar Prabhu that I have 5-10 volunteers who will be doing here. They'll be working here for 3-4 hours. Can you please keep some prasad out for them? Otherwise, devotees, they'll come to a temple, work hard, and in the end there's no prasad, then that's like the worst thing. 3-4 hours you work hard, and then at lunchtime all the prasadam is finished, there's nothing. How will they be inspired to continue on the service? So this is the first responsibility of every leader, that he needs to make sure that there is food for everyone. He needs to make sure that there's proper prasad from everyone. As Prabhupada will always say, the army runs on its stomach. Then number 2 is prinana, which means giving gifts and making the citizens or making the devotees who are working with happy. So this is something Rupa Goswami also talks about in Nectar Instruction, that the 6 loving exchanges amongst devotees, one is offering prasadam, accepting prasadam, dadati pratigrinati, offering gifts in charity and accepting gifts in charity. So when someone gives us a gift, then immediately we're surprised, like, wow, did you actually giving me this gift? That's so, how kind of you. It immediately melts our heart and immediately obliges us to that other person, because a gift is something that we never expect. And when someone comes to us and gives us a gift, immediately we're blown away that this person is giving me such nice gift out of love, and immediately our heart melts and we want to again reciprocate and also give our love to that person. So this is another duty of a leader, that is supposed to give gifts in charity to those who's working with. So when he gives gifts in charity, all those persons who he's working with, immediately their heart melts and they feel obliged to give themselves also to help that person in his service. Then number 3, upalalana, which means to satisfy the citizens or those persons who is working with sweet words. And Prabhupada also explains upalalana means you treat them as if they were your sons, or you treat them as if they were your children. So just like with our children, we'll speak very sweet words, encourage them. If the children are doing something nice, we'll praise them, glorify them, and this way show so much care, love, and attention to our children. In the same way, just like a parent, Krishna is also explaining in this text 45, just like a parent shows love and affection and speaks such nice, sweet, encouraging words to his children, in the same way a leader is supposed to speak some nice words to those who are working under him, show care, love, and affection. When they're doing something good, encourage them, glorify them, make them feel good. In this way, they'll be further enthused to do more service, further enthused to continue on serving. Then number 4, Anusasana, which means to give instructions on how to become first-class citizens or first-class devotees. So it's also our responsibility as leader or head of any group or department, is that we're supposed to practically teach those under us how to do a particular service properly. So if you're in the kitchen, then the leader of the kitchen is supposed to show other devotees, okay, this is how you chop, this is how you wash in the wash area, you need to wear proper shoes. Like this is supposed to give instructions and teach others and help others, come to a proper standard. So this is also one of the responsibilities. Not that he just speaks sweet words and if someone is doing something wrong, he just overlooks it. That's not good, because that will, that's like disservice. Just like a parent, if he's seeing his children doing something wrong, if he doesn't correct it, then he's not acting as a responsible parent. So again, this is also one of the duties, that he needs to instruct those working under him into a proper way of doing things. And if they're doing something wrong, then he's supposed to correct them and show them the right way of doing things. But if we only give instructions without showing love and affection, without giving gifts, without taking care of the prasad, then devotees will get burnt out and no one will want to deal with us or associate with us. So all of these things have to go hand in hand. We're supposed to take care of the bodily maintenance of the devotees, make sure there's good prasad, make sure the devotees are healthy, encourage them, speak sweet words, give them gifts in charity. Then the devotees, they'll be obliged to us, their hearts will be softened, there'll be a strong bond and relationship. So then when we correct them and give instructions or guidance in how to do things properly, they won't take it personally, they will accept those instructions. Then lastly is Prajapalana, which means giving protection and security to the citizens. So as the word literally goes, Kshatriya, Shat means hurt or harm, and Trayate means to deliver. So Kshatriya is one who protects his citizens from harm, both physical harm from thieves and so on and so forth, and also from subtle harm or even more dangerous harm of lust. Prabhupada explains in Bhava Gita. In Krishna book, Prabhupada writes that the most dangerous disease in this world is the heart disease of lust. So the most dangerous disease, Prabhupada says, is not coronavirus, cancer, lung cancer, this or that. Prabhupada says the most dangerous disease in this world is that disease, subtle disease of the heart, which is called lust. So Kshatriya is supposed to protect his citizens from this principle of lust. So that's the duties of a Kshatriya. So text number 46, an earthly king who protects himself and all citizens by removing all sins from his kingdom will certainly enjoy with Lord Indra in airplanes as brilliant as the sun. Text 47, if a Brahmana cannot support himself through his regular duties and is thus suffering, he may adopt the occupation of a merchant and overcome his destitute condition by buying and selling material things. If he continues to suffer extreme poverty even as a merchant, then he may adopt the occupation of a Kshatriya, taking sword in hand, but he cannot in any circumstances become like a dog, accepting an ordinary master. So now Krishna is saying that in the case of an emergency, if a Brahmana, he can't maintain himself by his proper Brahmanical occupational duties, then in these cases of emergency, it's okay for a Brahmana to take on to practice the occupation of a Vaishya or to practice the occupation of a Kshatriya in emergency situations. But a Brahmana can never, even in emergency, take up the occupation of a Shudra. So in emergencies, a Brahmana can act as a Vaishya, he can act as a Kshatriya, but never in any circumstances should a Brahmana take up the occupation of a Shudra. That's what Krishna is talking about in this text. Example of a Brahmana taking up the occupation of Kshatriya, we can see in Mahabharata, Dronacharya. Dronacharya was a Brahmana, but he took the role of a Kshatriya. He was also fighting in the battlefield of Kurukshetra. So that's an example of Brahmana taking on the role of a Kshatriya. and an example of a Brahmana taking on the role of a Vaishya. We'll see later on in 11th canto, if some of you might have heard about it in lectures, of the famous story of the Avanti Brahmana. So later on in the same 11th canto, later on in this volume, we'll come across this particular Brahmana called the Avanti Brahmana, who maintained himself by Vaishya activities. He maintained himself by agriculture. He would get different crops and so on and so forth. Then he would sell those things as a merchant, make business, and he would also engage in banking. So all of these are different activities of a Vaishya: banking, agriculture, trade, buying, selling. So this Brahmana, he was doing all these things. So that's another example of a Brahmana doing the activities of a Vaishya. Text 48. A king or other member of the royal order who cannot maintain himself by his normal occupation may act as a Vaishya, may live by hunting, or may act as a Brahmana by teaching others Vedic knowledge. But he may not, under any circumstances, adopt the profession of a Shudra. So same thing for Kshatriyas. In emergencies, Kshatriyas can take up the role of a Vaishya or take up the role of a Brahmana, but never, even in emergency, should a Kshatriya take up the role of a Shudra. Text 49. A Vaishya or mercantile man who cannot maintain himself may adopt the occupation of a Shudra, and a Shudra who cannot find a master can engage in simple activities like making baskets and mats of straw. However, all members of society who have adopted inferior occupations in emergency situations must give up those substitute occupations when the difficulties have passed. So for a Vaishya, it's permitted. In emergencies, a Vaishya, he can take up the role of a Shudra. And as far as a Shudra is concerned, a Shudra's duty is to find a master and to serve a master. But if a Shudra, he can't find a master, then Krishna is saying, then he can engage in simple activities like making baskets and mats made of straw. So some simple menial tasks he himself can do by himself. But Krishna is saying, when the emergency situation is gone, then all these particular varnas are supposed to go back to their constituted position. So in emergency, a Brahmana, he might be acting as a Vaishya, but when that situation is sorted out, then he should come back to his Brahmana status, Brahmanical duties. Text 50. One in the Grihastha order of life should daily worship the sages by Vedic study, the forefathers by offering the mantra Swada, the demigods by chanting Swaha, all living entities by offering shares of one's meals, and human beings by offering grains and water. Thus, considering the demigods, sages, forefathers, living entities, and human beings to be manifestations of my potency, one should daily perform these 5 sacrifices. So now Krishna has started the different instructions for those in the Grihastha ashram. So here Krishna is saying there should be 5 sacrifices that every Grihastha is supposed to daily. But in the purport, the devotees of Srila Prabhupada, they're quoting the famous verse, Devrasi Bhuta Apnaninam Pitrinam, where it's explained that any devotee who has fully taken shelter of Krishna's lotus feet, for him, he's automatically excused from all this obligation to demigods, sages, other living entities, so on and so forth. So if we just simply dedicate our lives for the pleasure of Shri Shri Radha Gopinath, acting and doing everything for their pleasure, then we don't have to do all of these sacrifices and rituals. Just simply doing everything for pleasure of Radha Gopinath, that automatically liberates us from all kinds of obligations to others. Text 51. A householder should comfortably maintain his dependence, either with money that comes of his own accord, or with that gathered by honest execution of one's duties. According to one's means, one should perform sacrifices and other religious duties. So in this verse, Krishna is saying that it's every householder's responsibility that he should comfortably maintain all of his dependents. So a husband, he should maintain his wife properly, and he should maintain his children. And we're hearing Ghanshyam Prabhu, he was sharing one pastime of Srila Prabhupada. There was one Mataji with a little kid, and Prabhupada asked this little kid, the Mataji had left in care with another Mataji. And Prabhupada asked, whose kid is this? And this Mataji said, it's this so-and-so Mataji's kid, and she's doing deity worship, so she's asked me to take care of her kid while she's gone for deity worship. And then Prabhupada called that other Mataji from deity worship and said, your first priority is to take care of your children. These children aren't ordinary. These children are all Vaikuntha children. They're all coming from the Vaikuntha planets because they're born in devotee families. So it is your first responsibility to take care of your children. immediately stop your deity worship and focus on taking care of your children. If deity worship is impeding you in your taking care of the children, then stop your deity worship. Taking care of your kid is higher priority than your deity worship. So in this way, Prabhupada was further emphasizing on this point, that as those in the household life, it's the top priority to take care of the children, to take care of the dependents. And Prabhupada was explaining this in this nice pastime. We'll go to the next text, text 52. A householder taking care of many dependent family members should not become materially attached to them, nor should he become mentally unbalanced, considering himself to be the Lord. An intelligent householder should see that all possible future happiness, just like that which he has already experienced, is temporary. Text 53. The association of children, wife, relatives, and friends is just like the brief meeting of travelers. With each change of body, one is separated from all such associates, just as one loses the objects one possesses in a dream when the dream is over. Text 54. Deeply considering the actual situation, a liberated soul should live at home just like a guest, without any sense of proprietorship or false ego. In this way, he will not be bound or entangled by domestic affairs. So in the last three texts, Krishna is explaining about this principle of how a householder, he shouldn't become materially attached to those in his family. Now, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't have any feelings or love for our dear and loved ones in our family. It just means that, for example, in Mahabharata we see that Arjuna, he heard the Bhagavad Gita from Krishna. He heard about the whole philosophy of body and soul. For the soul there is neither birth and death. The soul is never destroyed. But still, after hearing Bhagavad Gita, when Arjuna's son Abhimanyu, he died on the battlefield, Arjuna was also crying. Arjuna was also lamenting. So for devotees, they're supposed to be the most soft-hearted, compassionate people. So it's not that they're completely stone-hearted, that if something happens to someone in the family, they don't care and they just, detached. Not in that sense. Detached in the sense that instead of seeing everyone in the family like materially, they see them on a spiritual level. How so? They see everyone in their family in connection with Krishna, or they see everyone in their family in connection with Shri Radha Gopinath. How so? The husband, he sees his wife and his children as devotees of Shri Radha Gopinath. And then so he does his duty to take care of his wife and children, seeing them as nice, wonderful devotees of Radha Gopinath. In the same way, the wife, she sees her children and her husband as wonderful devotees of Radha Gopinath, and then she tries to serve them, in seeing them as servants of Radha Gopinath. So in this way, when we see everyone in our family as in connection with Radha Gopinath, in connection with Krishna, then that whatever attachment we feel for each other is not mature, it immediately becomes spiritual. Just like we come to temple, we have our devotee friends, and a strong bond we have between devotees, that's spiritual, it's not material. And if a devotee, something happens to him, then we feel great, hurt inside. If a devotee passes away, we feel great separation. So in the same way, because as Krishna conscious households, because we see everyone in a house as in relation with Krishna, then that attachment is not material, it becomes spiritualized, it becomes spiritual. Text 55. A householder devotee who worships me by execution of his family duties may remain at home, go to a holy place, or if he has a responsible son, take sannyas. So towards the end of the Grahastha ashram, so let's say after 50 or so, Krishna is giving three options for the household or the Grahastha. Option number one, Krishna is saying that you can continue staying at home. A householder devotee who worships me by execution of his family duties may remain at home. So option number one, you continue being in your home, worshipping Krishna, doing lot of service, preaching, and pushing forward the movement. So that's one option for householders. Now you can just continue remaining at home, engage in full-on devotional service, come to a temple, do a lot of service, preach, push forward the movement. Option number two, Krishna is saying that you leave the house and you go to a holy place. So yes, we see many times in Vedic culture how great kings, they would leave their kingdom and they would go off in pilgrimage. And in this case, the householder can either do it by himself or he can take his wife. So that's like vanaprastha life, that one retires from family activities, and one goes and settles in some dham. One goes, settles in Vrindavan, Mathura, Jagannath Puri, or goes on pilgrimage to different holy places. So that's option number 2. Third option for the grihastha is, if he has a responsible son, take sannyas. So option number 1, you continue staying in your home, worshipping deity, doing preaching, deity worship, so on and so forth, serving the Vaishnavas. Option number 2, you go and settle in some dham like Mayapur, Vrindavan, go on pilgrimage. Number 3, take sannyas. Text number 56. But a householder whose mind is attached to his home, and who is thus disturbed by ardent desires to enjoy his money and children, who is lusty after women, who is possessed of a miserly mentality, and who unintelligently thinks, everything is mine and I am everything, is certainly bound in illusion. 57. O my poor elderly parents, O my wife with a mere infant in her arms, and my other young children, without me they have absolutely no one to protect them and will suffer unbearably. How can my poor relatives possibly live without me? Text 58. Thus, because of his foolish mentality, a householder whose heart is overwhelmed by family attachment is never satisfied. Constantly meditating on his relatives, he dies and enters into the darkness of ignorance. So these last 3 texts is not talking about a grihastha or a householder in Krishna consciousness. It's talking about a griha medi, so like a karmi, the non-devotees out there who are also in household life, but they're not Krishna conscious. So what's their position is being described in these last 3 texts. So that brings us to chapter 18. Chapter 18, at the start, Krishna will start talking about the Vanaprastha ashram, and these verses are short, so I'll just quickly read over these Vanaprastha ashram verses, and then we'll stop for this week. So, Canto 11, Chapter 18, Text 1. The Supreme Personality God has said, one who desires to adopt the 3rd order of life, Vanaprastha, should enter the forest with a peaceful mind, leaving his wife with his mature sons, or else taking her along with him. So Vanaprastha life, either you can go alone or you can take your wife. And in general, in Vedic culture, in the past, they used to go to the forest. And the great kings, they would maintain these forests called Tapo Vanas. So Tapa means austerity and Vana means forest. So in Vedic culture, just like in town planning, in modern society, whenever someone is building a suburb or a town, they'll always build a nice park, streets, and so on and so forth. In part of town planning in Vedic culture, the king is supposed to make these forests called tapovanas, or forests specifically dedicated for vanaprasthas to go and practice tapasya. And these forests will be called tapovana. Just like we have Vrindavana. Vrindavana is a forest where Vrinda Devi goes, so tapavana, a forest where vanaprasthas can go and do tapasya. Text 2. Having adopted the vanaprastha order of life, one should arrange one's sustenance by eating uncontaminated bulbs, roots, and fruits that grow in the forest. One may dress oneself with tree bark, grass, leaves, or animal skins. The vanaprastha should not groom the hair on his head, body, or face, should not manicure his nails, should not pass stool and urine at irregular times, and should not make a special endeavor for dental hygiene. He should be content to take bath in water 3 times daily and should sleep on the ground. Thus engaged as a vanaprastha, one should execute penance during the hottest days of the summer, subjecting oneself to burning fires on 4 sides and the blazing sun overhead. During the rainy season, one should remain outside, subjecting oneself to torrents of rain. And in the freezing winter, one should remain submerged in water up to one's neck. So a lot of severe austerities for a vanaprastha in the previous ages. So obviously all of this is not practical for us now in this day and age, to wear matted hair, not cut our nails, not brush our teeth, so on and so forth. All these austerities is not practical. Prabhupada says again, in this day and age, the only thing that works is chanting Hare Krishna. So we chant Hare Krishna ourselves, and we help and inspire others to chant Hare Krishna. So that's the austerity for this day and age. One may eat foodstuffs prepared with fire, such as grains or fruits ripened by time. One may grind one's food with mortar and stone, or with one's teeth. Text 6. The vanaprastha should personally collect whatever he requires for his bodily maintenance, carefully considering the time, place, and his own capacity. He should never collect provisions for the future. Text 7. One who has accepted the vanaprastha order of life should perform seasonal sacrifices by offering oblations of charu and sacrificial cakes prepared from rice and other grains found in the forest. The vanaprastha, however, may never offer animal sacrifices to me, even those sacrifices mentioned in the Vedas. Text 8. The vanaprastha should perform the Agnihotra, Darsa and Purna Masa sacrifices as he did while in the Grahastha ashram. He should also perform the vows and sacrifices of Chaturmasya, since all of these rituals are enjoined for the vanaprastha ashram by expert followers of the Vedas. The saintly vanaprastha, practicing severe austerities and accepting only the bare necessities of life, becomes so emaciated that he appears to be mere skin and bones. It's a very scary austerity. Thus, worshipping me through severe penances, he goes to the Maharloka planet and then directly achieves me. So this is the destination of someone who follows vanaprastha life properly, doing all these severe austerities in the previous ages, but is not Krishna conscious. If someone was Krishna conscious, he will go straight to Goloka Vrindavan. But if someone is just doing these austerities but not really a devotee of Lord, then he goes to the Maharloka planetary system. So these are the kind of people that go to Mahaloka, Janaloka, Tapaloka, Brahmaloka. So all these great personalities in the previous ages who did a lot of tapasya and austerities, they would go to these higher planetary systems. But obviously if one is Krishna conscious, then he goes straight home, back to Goloka Vrindavan. In fact, while living in this world, he is already in Goloka Vrindavan due to his Krishna consciousness. And I read something very nice by Prabhupada yesterday in Krishna book. Prabhupada, he was explaining what does it mean to be Krishna conscious. Prabhupada says, if someone wants to be considered as being Krishna conscious, he has to satisfy three conditions. Number one, he needs to understand that he is always the servant of the servants of Krishna. Number two, he needs to understand that he is most insignificant. And number three, he needs to understand that whatever good he is able to do is simply by the grace of Guru and Krishna. So if one understands and realizes these three things, Prabhupada says in Krishna book, then he is Krishna conscious. So when I read that, it really struck me. And this is something we can meditate on for, as Prabhupada is saying, only if we can exemplify these three things, tick these three boxes, can we be considered to be Krishna conscious. So again, number one, we need to understand that we are always the servant of the servants of Krishna. So Prabhupada used the word always, which means not that, okay, initially we're a new bhakta, okay, we're das anudas. Initially when you're a new devotee, you're the servant of all the Vaishnavas. Then after 10 years, 20 years, when you become advanced devotee, then instead of being the servant of the devotees, you become the leader of the devotees, you become the master of devotees, and the other junior devotees, they become our servants. So it's not like that. Prabhupada says we need to understand, number one, that we are always the servant of the servants of Krishna. So not that initially in our first few years we're the servant of the devotees, then as the years go by we become the master of the devotees, we become the leaders of the devotees. No. In all times, place and circumstances, we need to understand that we're always the servant of the servants of Krishna. Number two, Prabhupada says, we need to understand that we are the most insignificant. Prabhupada says not just insignificant, but the most insignificant. So that humility needs to be there. And number three, Prabhupada says we need to understand that whatever little good we're able to do, a little good singing or cooking or preaching, reciting slokas, whatever little good we're able to do, is not due to our own endeavor, own abilities, but it's simply due to the grace of Guru and Krishna. If we can practice these three things, Prabhupada says we'll always be considered to be Krishna conscious, we'll always be considered to be in Goloka Vrindavan. This is Vrindavan consciousness. Text number 10. One who with long endeavor executes this painful but exalted penance, which awards ultimate liberation, simply to achieve insignificant sense gratification, must be considered the greatest fool. So in this verse, Krishna is saying, if someone just does all these austerities just to get some material pleasure by going to heavenly planets, then he's just, the most foolish person. All these austerities should be done to please Shri Radha Gopinath, to please Krishna, not to just attain some material power or material pleasure. Text 11. If the vanaprastha is overtaken by old age, and because of his trembling body is no longer able to execute his prescribed duties, he should place the sacrificial fire within his heart by meditation. Then, fixing his mind on me, he should enter into that fire and give up his body. Text 12. So this is the last verse of this section of Vanaprastha Ashram. If the Vanaprastha, understanding that even promotion to Brahmaloka is a miserable situation, develops complete detachment from all possible results of fruitive activities, then he may take the sannyas order of life. So from 13 onwards, Krishna will start talking about the fourth order of life, the sannyas ashram. So that concludes the session for today. Thank you for everyone who tuned in today. Nantra Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Jaguru Srila Prabhupada ki jai, devotees on Mayapur TV, YouTube and Facebook ki jai. Jai Gaur Premanande, Hari Hari Bol.